Sir, step away from the barrier. Do you understand me?
Alright. I'm not a threat. I just need to report in.
What are you doing out here in that? I need you to remove your helmet slowly.
My name is Dr. Eris Thorne. I'm from beyond. My ship crash landed.
Where did you come from? Answer the question.
Border Patrol? I don't understand.
The cold desert air clung to the pre-dawn silence, broken only by the distant hum of unseen machinery and the frantic, shallow breath of a man in a damaged spacesuit. This was the moment when two disparate realities collided, a collision engineered not by chance, but by a system that prioritizes suspicion over evidence and bias over basic human dignity. It was a moment Agent Miles Corbin, an officer with 17 documented complaints against his name, encountered Dr. Eris Thorne, a NASA astronaut whose credentials and achievements dwarfed the very authority Corbin wielded. Dr. Thorne, a man who had dedicated his life to pushing the boundaries of human knowledge, found himself treated not as a national asset, but as an anonymous threat, a criminal to be neutralized. His advanced training, his years of rigorous scientific exploration, his very identity, were rendered invisible in the harsh glare of flashlight beam. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop a comment below and let us know. Your engagement helps us bring these critical stories to light. The setting was stark. The desolate, unforgiving expanse of the Chihuahuan Desert, specifically a remote sector near Columbus, New Mexico, just miles from the international border. It was 4:17 a.m. on October 27th. A thin, cold mist unusual for the region clung to the creosote bushes, giving the landscape an otherworldly, almost lunar quality. The sky, a bruised purple, was just beginning to surrender to the first pale streaks of dawn. The air, typically dry and still, carried a faint metallic tang, a whisper of something alien that had recently disturbed its ancient calm. Dr. Eris Thorne was not merely an astronaut. He was a luminary in his field. Born in Atlanta, Georgia, Thorne's brilliance was evident from an early age. He graduated summa cum laude from Morehouse College with a degree in physics before earning his Ph.D. in astrophysics from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. His postdoctoral work at Harvard focused on exoplanetary atmospheric composition, a specialization that placed him at the forefront of the search for extraterrestrial life. Thorne had published dozens of peer-reviewed articles, lectured at international conferences, and was a recipient of the Presidential Medal of Science for his groundbreaking contributions to propulsion theory. He was a veteran of 2 space shuttle missions and had spent nearly 300 days aboard the International Space Station, commanding its orbital laboratory. His selection for Project Orion, a highly classified deep space exploratory mission, was a testament to his unparalleled expertise, his calm under pressure, and his unwavering dedication. Dr. Thorne had earned his position among the stars, and his return to Earth, albeit unscheduled and chaotic, should have been met with immediate recognition and relief. Agent Miles Corbin, however, operated in a different orbit entirely. Stationed at the Columbus Border Patrol Station, Corbin was a familiar and often feared figure within the local community. His personnel file, later made public through discovery in the ensuing lawsuit, painted a disturbing portrait of a career marked by escalating aggression and a consistent disregard for established protocols. Across his 8 years with the agency, Corbin had amassed a staggering 17 formal complaints. 17. These were not minor infractions. Internal Affairs records show that in 2018, Corbin was cited for excessive force during a routine vehicle stop involving a migrant family near Deming. Witnesses reported that he had forcibly removed a mother from her car, twisting her arm behind her back, despite her immediate compliance and the terrified cries of her children. The incident resulted in a fractured wrist for the woman and a formal reprimand for Corbin, though no suspension. Then, in 2020, he faced accusations of racial profiling from a prominent local rancher, Mr. Eduardo Ramirez, whose vehicle was subjected to an hour-long, intrusive search without probable cause, simply for fitting the profile of drug traffickers. Ramirez, a third-generation American citizen, eventually filed a civil complaint that was settled out of court. A more serious incident occurred in late 2021, when Corbin's failure to follow de-escalation procedures in a high-stress situation led directly to the severe injury of suspect. During an attempted apprehension of an individual suspected of crossing the border illegally, Corbin bypassed established communication protocols and rushed the suspect, resulting in a fall that left the individual with a spinal injury. The internal investigation concluded Corbin had acted outside the bounds of reasonable force guidelines. Yet again, he received only a short suspension without pay. Finally, in early 2023, multiple witnesses at a roadside checkpoint accused Corbin of verbal abuse and intimidation tactics, targeting individuals who questioned his authority or asserted their rights. The pattern was clear. Agent Corbin consistently prioritized his own aggressive instincts over procedure, de-escalation, or even basic respect for the individuals he encountered. This history, a red flag flapping violently in his personnel file, set the stage for the catastrophic encounter that was about to unfold. The call came in at 3:58 a.m. to Border Patrol Dispatch. Unidentified individual in suspicious, bulky gear, possibly armed, observed near the border fence, Sector 3B. Appears disoriented, moving erratically. The description, vague and laced with alarmist conjecture, instantly triggered a rapid response. The words suspicious and possibly armed were enough to override any nuance, any call for caution. Meanwhile, Dr. Eris Thorne was fighting for his life. His emergency landing, a controlled crash after a catastrophic systems failure during re-entry, had deposited his personal escape pod in the rugged New Mexico desert. The pod was now a smoldering wreck, hidden in a deep arroyo, miles from any road. His custom-designed EVA suit, though damaged, had protected him from the worst of the impact, but its internal columns were fried, and the suit's cooling system was failing. Disoriented, his head ringing from the impact, Dr. Thorne was attempting to activate a backup distress beacon, a small, handheld device he had managed to retrieve from his suit's utility belt. He was limping, the desert sand crunching under his heavy boots, away from the wreckage, desperately seeking a clear line of sight for the beacon signal. His activity was mundane, legitimate, and entirely focused on survival and mission recovery. He was an American astronaut, on American soil, in a state of extreme distress. Should officers, especially those operating in sensitive border regions, be mandated to verify the credentials and identities of individuals before escalating to physical confrontation, particularly when the circumstances are highly unusual? Agent Miles Corbin, responding to dispatch, spotted the strange, bulky figure silhouetted against the nascent dawn. His mind, already primed by the suspicious gear report, immediately jumped to the worst-case scenario. He pulled his patrol vehicle to a screeching halt, dust billowing around him, and exited with his weapon drawn, the beam of his tactical flashlight cutting through the dim light. "Hands! Let me see your hands. Get on the ground." Corbin's voice, amplified by the desert's quiet, was a harsh bark. Dr. Thorne, startled, dropped the beacon. He raised his gloved hands, slowly, the visor of his helmet obscuring his face but not his bewilderment, through the damaged comms in his helmet. He tried to speak, his voice crackling, distorted. I'm Dr. Eris Thorne, NASA emergency landing." Corbin, however, wasn't listening. His eyes were fixed on the unfamiliar, bulky suit, the strange reflective visor, the faint scorch marks. "NASA? Right. Anyone can fake that. Get on the ground now. Don't make me ask again." Thorne tried again, his voice strained. "My pod, it crashed. Project Orion. I need to contact Mission Control." He gestured vaguely toward the hidden arroyo, then tried to point to the prominent NASA insignia on his chest and shoulder. The official patches, clearly visible even in the dim light, were designed for instant recognition. "I said hands on the ground." Corbin yelled, advancing quickly, his weapon still aimed. "You think I'm stupid? What's in the suit? What are you carrying?" He disregarded the insignia, the desperate pleas, the sheer improbability of someone faking a full, damaged space suit in the middle of the New Mexico desert. His preconceived notions had already locked in. "This is a classified mission. I am a U.S. citizen. You need to stand down." Thorne managed, his word a desperate plea for understanding. Corbin scoffed, taking another aggressive step. "Classified? You're trespassing on federal land, in some kind of costume. You're coming with me." He holstered his weapon, but moved with a predatory swiftness, grabbing Thorne's arm. Despite the bulk of the suit, Corbin's grip was brutal, twisting Thorne's arm behind his back. The astronaut, still dazed and injured from the crash, cried out in pain as he was forced to his knees in the dust. The distress beacon, now lying forgotten, continued to emit its faint, unheard signal. The commotion, however, had not gone entirely unnoticed. A local rancher, Mr. Mateo Sanchez, out checking his fences before sunrise, had witnessed the aggressive approach. His cell phone, already recording, captured the chilling exchange. Simultaneously, a drone operated by a private security firm, contracted by a nearby research facility, also recorded the incident from a higher vantage point, its thermal imaging clearly showing the heat signature of the damaged escape pod in the arroyo and the struggling figure on the ground. Just as Corbin was attempting to cuff the bewildered astronaut, a second Border Patrol vehicle skidded to a halt. Agent in charge Elena Rodriguez, a seasoned officer with a reputation for professionalism, had been monitoring the vague dispatch call and felt a growing unease. What she saw made her blood run cold. A fully suited individual, clearly bearing NASA markings, being violently restrained by one of her agents. "Corbin, stand down. What in God's name are you doing?" Rodriguez's voice cut through the tense air. She leaped from her vehicle, her eyes wide with disbelief and dawning horror. She immediately recognized the distinctive design of a high-altitude, re-entry-capable EVA suit. "Those are NASA insignia. What's your intel on this?" Corbin, flustered but defiant, gestured dismissively. "He claims he's an astronaut, sir. Says he crashed. But he's not cooperating, acting suspicious." Rodriguez knelt beside the struggling Dr. Thorne, her gaze sweeping over the suit, the scorch marks, the desperate expression in his visible eyes to the helmet's visor. She then looked at Corbin, her face a mask of controlled fury. "Suspicious? This is a national security incident, not a routine apprehension. Get away from him, now. And I want your badge and weapon on my desk by 0800. You're relieved of duty, effective immediately." The gravity of her words hung heavy in the pre-dawn air. The immediate aftermath was a whirlwind of damage control and high-level intervention. Within minutes of Agent Rodriguez's arrival and her urgent calls to regional command, the scene was swarming with federal agents, not just Border Patrol, but NASA Security, FBI, and even elements of the Department of Defense. Dr. Eris Thorne, suffering from mild concussion, dehydration, and a dislocated shoulder from Corbin's aggressive restraint, was immediately whisked away by a specialized medical team to a secure military facility. His identity was confirmed beyond any doubt, and the full weight of a national security incident involving a classified space mission began to unravel. The incident itself, however, refused to remain contained within the classified corridors of federal agencies. Mr. Mateo Sanchez's cell phone footage, shaky but undeniable, depicting a federal agent violently apprehending a man in a recognizable spacesuit, was uploaded to social media just hours after the event. Within an hour, it had garnered tens of thousands of views. By midday, after news outlets picked up the story and the drone footage from the private security firm was anonymously leaked, the hashtag Astronaut detained was trending globally. The video went viral, accumulating over 50 million views across various platforms within 24 hours. The image of Dr. Thorne, a symbol of American scientific achievement, being manhandled by a Border Patrol agent, became a searing indictment of unchecked authority and systemic bias. Should officers who demonstrate a clear pattern of excessive force, racial profiling, or disregard for protocol face automatic termination, rather than repeated reprimands or suspensions? The institutional responses were swift and severe. The Department of Justice, NASA, and the State Department immediately launched a joint investigation. Dr. Thorne, once medically cleared, wasted no time in filing a comprehensive lawsuit against Agent Miles Corbin, the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency, and the Department of Homeland Security. His claims were extensive: false imprisonment, assault and battery, civil rights violations under the Fourth Amendment, and severe emotional distress. The lawsuit detailed profound trauma inflicted upon a decorated astronaut who, having just survived a perilous reentry, was then subjected to unwarranted aggression on his own soil. The legal battle, while complex, ultimately found the federal government in an untenable position. The overwhelming evidence, multiple video recordings, Dr. Thorne's impeccable credentials, the testimony of Agent Rodriguez, and Corbin's own damning personnel file left little room for defense. In an effort to mitigate further public outcry and avoid a protracted, embarrassing trial that would expose deeper systemic issues, the government moved to settle. The settlement, finalized after intense negotiations, amounted to an unprecedented $6 million. It was the largest settlement in state history. For a single incident involving a federal officer, a staggering sum that underscored the egregious nature of Agent Corbin's actions and the institutional failures that enabled them. As for Agent Miles Corbin, his career was over. His termination letter, a scathing document later released to the public, stated, "Agent Corbin has demonstrated profound disregard for established agency protocol, exhibited egregious judgment in a high-stakes, sensitive situation, and brought irreparable discredit upon the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency. His actions were not only a dereliction of duty, but constitute a severe abuse of power, directly resulting in significant harm to an individual and substantial financial and reputational damage to the federal government." He was summarily fired, and the process for his decertification as a federal law enforcement officer was immediately initiated, effectively ending any possibility of him serving in law enforcement again. The cost of one agent's unchecked bias and aggression had reached into the millions and touched the highest levels of national security. In a powerful press conference held weeks after his recovery, Dr. Aris Thorne, still visibly shaken but resolute, delivered a testimony that resonated across the nation. "I have faced the vacuum of space, the fiery crucible of reentry, and the isolation of deep space missions," he began, his voice calm but firm. "I have trained for every conceivable emergency, every technical failure. But nothing in my extensive training prepared me for being treated as a criminal on my own planet, by my own government, simply because I was in an unfamiliar suit and disoriented. If this can happen to me, a decorated NASA astronaut, a black man in a verifiable NASA suit, with irrefutable credentials, what hope does an undocumented migrant or a person of color without my privileges and platform have when they encounter an officer predisposed to suspicion and aggression?" His words cut to the core of the issue, transforming a singular incident into a stark indictment of systemic injustice. "This was not merely a misunderstanding," he continued. "This was a failure of training, a failure of oversight, and ultimately, a failure of empathy. It was a demonstration of how deeply ingrained bias can override overwhelming evidence, even when national security is at stake. My suit, my insignia, my very identity were dismissed as a fake, because they didn't fit a preconceived narrative of what a threat looks like. Should an incident of this magnitude, exposing such profound failures in judgment and systemic bias within a federal agency, automatically trigger a comprehensive federal investigation into the agency's training, oversight, and internal culture?" The department's internal findings, eventually released under intense public pressure, confirmed Dr. Thorne's broader critique. The investigation revealed a disturbing array of systemic failures within the Border Patrol sector. It cited inadequate training on de-escalation techniques, particularly in unusual or ambiguous scenarios. It highlighted a critical lack of specific protocols for identifying and interacting with federal assets or personnel, especially in emergency situations. Crucially, the report acknowledged a pervasive issue of implicit bias within agent training and operational procedures, noting that the default assumption often leaned towards criminality, particularly for individuals perceived as outsiders or those whose appearance deviated from established norms. The report also exposed a culture of insufficient oversight for agents with multiple complaints, allowing problem officers like Miles Corbin to continue operating without meaningful corrective action. The pattern was clear, as the report stated, of a system that allowed aggression to fester rather than be rooted out. In response to the scandal and the damning internal findings, U.S. Customs and Border Protection announced a series of sweeping reforms. These included mandatory, enhanced retraining programs for all agents focused on de-escalation, implicit bias recognition, and cultural competency. New, stringent protocols were immediately implemented for identifying and verifying federal personnel and assets, including direct lines of communication with other agencies like NASA and the Department of Defense for rapid verification. The agency also pledged to implement a more robust oversight system for agents with a history of complaints, promising swifter disciplinary action and mandatory psychological evaluations. Finally, a significant community outreach program was announced, aimed at rebuilding trust with border communities. The case of Dr. Eris Thorne and Agent Miles Corbin is more than just an isolated incident. It is a profound parable of systemic injustice. It starkly illustrates how deeply entrenched biases, left unchecked and unaddressed within an institutional framework, can utterly override objective evidence, even when that evidence is as undeniable as a NASA spacesuit or as critical as a national security asset. The system, designed to protect the border, instead defaulted to suspicion and aggression, transforming a hero into a suspect. The consequences were catastrophic. A decorated astronaut suffered trauma. A federal officer lost his career. The agency faced national embarrassment, and American taxpayers footed a $6 million bill. The trust between law enforcement and the public, already fragile, was further eroded. The challenge now is not just about what happened, but what changes. Will these reforms be superficial, or will they genuinely penetrate the entrenched culture of suspicion and aggression? Will the lessons learned from this multi-million-dollar mistake be institutionalized, or will they fade as public memory recedes? Should federal agencies implement a zero-tolerance policy for agents with repeated, documented complaints of bias, excessive force, or dereliction of duty, leading to automatic review for termination? Your thoughts are crucial. This story is a stark reminder that the fight for accountability, for justice, and for a system that truly serves and protects all its citizens is never over. We're not stopping our investigation into these systemic failures. Subscribe to our channel, share this video with everyone you know, and join the conversation in the comments below. Your voice is powerful. It's about all of us.